everybody. Welcome to church. So glad you've joined us this weekend. All of our locations, a big hello to you, and all of you joining us online. We're glad you are along for the ride. In fact, here in Newark, would you help me show some love to everybody joining us, our church family. And if you are here for the first time, very, very glad that you are here. We're in week 3 of a series that we've called Influence, all about living an influential life, which we've seen over the past few weeks we are all already doing. So whatever we believe about God or spiritual things, and whether we're aware of it or not, we all have more influence than we realize. And if you missed the first 2 messages of the series, I encourage you to go back and watch those and get caught up to speed with this series. But as we jump into week 3, I got my first car when I was 17. I'll never forget, I was 17 years old, and it was not exactly a luxury car, if you know what I mean. It was old, it was slow, it was a little rusty, but the worst part about it was the shocking lack of options. It was a base model, like the basest of base models. And I know I'm gonna date myself here, it's okay, I'm brave. The windows, anybody know what I'm talking about? Roll up the windows. If you know, you got that. You know, whether you rolled up with the left or the right, you got that one bicep. You know, you just from rolling up the locks. You pressed. I mean, the lock. I know. This is back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. You press the lock down. My first car just had no options, and that's okay. But I have learned since then that a few options can make driving a car so much more enjoyable. Right? Heated seats. Yeah, just some of us know what the heated seat life is like. Apple CarPlay, other options. Okay, all right. Some people are really excited about Apple CarPlay. Other options make operating a vehicle a little less risky, like airbags. Thank God for those options, and backup cameras. When my daughter was getting her license, we were talking about what kind of car she might eventually get one day. She said, I don't care. It just has to have a backup camera. I guess she was just very nervous. She would constantly be backing up into things without a backup camera. Those are good options. Some things make the drive better for our passengers, like reclining seats, so everyone can take a nap while I drive. How many of us have been there? Options. I think our lives are kind of like this. If you think about it, we are all steering a life, and we are all, to one degree or another, in the driver's seat of our life. And in one respect, we're all going to eventually get from point A, birth, to point B, death. But the question is, how's the drive going? And how do we make the most of this vehicle that's called life so that the trip can be filled with purpose and joy? And then for the passengers that we bring along, for our families and friends and our spouses and parents and kids and the people we're doing life with, the people in our community of faith, the people who get into the vehicle of our life and our story with us at different times, how are our lives influencing theirs? And wherever we are in our spiritual journey right now, what could the drive look like if we had some more options? So in the New Testament of the Bible, there's a little book, 2 little books actually, written by a guy named Peter. And Peter was one of Jesus' first disciples, his closest followers. And when he wrote what we're about to read, which is the second of these 2 letters that he is the writer of in the New Testament, the movement of Jesus had been spreading rapidly. And we actually don't know who Peter was writing to specifically. We just know that it was people who had believed in Jesus. Some of them perhaps very recently had believed in Jesus. This whole following Jesus thing was new to them, but they needed to be encouraged to continue in their spiritual journey, like a lot of us. And Peter wanted them to understand that following Jesus is about more than just getting saved and then driving the base model for the rest of your life. It's about more than just saying, well, I've decided that I'm gonna follow Jesus, but I'm just gonna kind of continue living the same way that I was living before I made that decision. And so Peter writes these words. He says, by his divine power, God has given us everything we need for living a godly life. Everything we need. I remember the first car I got with some options. It was wonderful. It just changed my life. A few years after that first car that I had, I got a car that it had AC and it worked. So the first car had it, but it didn't work. It's an option. You don't have to have AC to drive a car, but how many of us know in the summer, it makes life better? It had a sunroof. I was so proud. I was like, I got a sunroof. I wanted to open it all the time just so people knew. I have a sunroof. Thank you. I have a sunroof. I've got all these options. And what Peter is saying here is that we can live a base model life spiritually if we want to. But God has actually given us everything we need to live a fully loaded spiritual life with all the options. And we know from Peter's story that he's not talking about an outwardly loaded life, okay? He's not talking about a life that is necessarily easy or comfortable or even wealthy or influential by the world's standards, but he's talking about what he describes as a godly life. What does that mean? It's not just a cliche. It means a life that reflects more and more the influence that the creator of the universe is having on us as we get to know him better. It's a life that is defined by the fingerprint of God upon it. It's a life that is influenced by God. That is a great life. Again, it's not always an easy life, not always a comfortable life, but it's a meaningful and purposeful life. And Peter says God has given us everything we need to live that life. Not 90% of the things, not most of the things, everything we need. All the options God has provided. But how many of us have ever felt like we didn't have everything we need to live that kind of life? How many of us, show of hands, just be honest. I have definitely felt that way. I've had moments in life where I'm like, God, you actually forgot about 49 things that I can think of right now that I need. I don't have everything I need. And I have been convinced different times in my life that I am missing some of the options that other people have. In my mind, maybe the right personality or paycheck, the right connections or experience or resume, maybe the right opportunities or upbringing. And so I have to keep coming back to this in my spiritual journey. Do I really believe that God has given me everything I need to experience the life that he has planned for me? Because the answer has a huge influence on how I live. If I don't believe that God has given me everything I need to live the life that he has planned for me, I'm gonna spend the journey of this life anxiously gripping the steering wheel, just kind of trying to survive until I get to the end. But when I believe that God has given me everything I need, that's gonna influence my life, and it's gonna change the way I influence the lives of people around me. If I believe God has given me everything I need, then I won't settle for a base model faith and base model relationships and a base model attitude, but I will lean into all that God has for me. And I want you to notice where everything we need comes from. It doesn't come from us. We actually don't have everything we need on our own. What Peter is saying is we are no longer on our own. For all of us who put our trust, our confidence in Jesus, we are not on our own. It is God's divine power that is taking care of us now. It is God's divine power that is providing everything we need now. And this is what Jesus invites us into. Not just a few added features tacked on to our old life, but a transformed life, a new life, a life that has been completely turned upside down in the best sort of way. And now we have a life that has access to God's power, strength from beyond us, and access to God's people, a community around us. God has given us everything we need. So if God has given me everything I need to live a fully loaded life, my question is, and you may be able to relate, why am I not always experiencing that life? Why do I sometimes feel like I don't have everything I need? And here's the next part. God has given us everything we need. So in view of all this, make every effort to respond to God's promises. God has given us everything we need to live a fully loaded spiritual life, to have access to everything he planned for us. So make every effort to respond to his promises. What? You mean it won't just happen? I won't just grow spiritually, even though I had no intention of it? My faith will not be fully formed while I'm sleeping? You mean I've got to make an effort to grow in my faith? Yes, through Jesus, we have a new car, a fully loaded, optioned out life that is available to us. And again, it's not a life where all our problems disappear. It's a life where we have all the purpose we need. But we get to decide to what level we experience this life in Christ. The options have all already been installed when we put our faith in Jesus. We're not working to convince God that he should give us these upgrades to our life. They've all already been installed. And all of us have been given this new car, this new vehicle, this new life. And now we are invited to make every effort to locate, activate, and enjoy what God has placed in the vehicle of this spiritual life. And that's on us. You ever suddenly realize that the car you own could do things you had no idea it could do? Has anybody else had this experience? So I actually preached a few weeks ago about my wife's car. We've had it for a few years now, but it beeps at us when we drift out of our lane very aggressively. It's trying to save our lives. It's like God. It's like, I'm trying to get your attention. You go in the wrong direction. Beeps at us, beep, 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 beep. But that's not all it does. It has all of these features, many of which we had no idea it had until we'd owned it for a long time. In fact, one of the things we discovered, I think we'd had the car for 2 or 3 months, when my wife found out that there is a button you can push that allows you to speak from the front seat, and it will project your voice to the third row. I know. Which means we no longer have to put up with whatever our kids are doing back there. We're like, hey, we see you. Cut it out. Thank you, Hyundai. Am I right? So I get a 5% commission on every Hyundai that you purchase this week. I'm just kidding. But it's a Hyundai, but it has all these features. Listen, what if we think we've discovered everything God's power can do in our lives, but we're actually overlooking some of the features of our faith? Some of us have been around Jesus for a while. We've been around faith for a while, and we have convinced ourselves we know what it does. We know how to stick the key in the ignition or push the button, and we know how to start it. We know how it goes. We know how to look in the mirrors. We think we've got the faith life figured out, and God is going, actually, there's a button that if you pushed it, that if you could locate it, and if you could activate it, could take your life and your experience with me to the next level. How many of us are making our way from point A to point B, but we are missing out on all that God intended for us? What God's word is saying to me is that there is a formula for a fully loaded life, and it looks like this. Everything God gives plus every effort I make equals a great life. And the order is important. I can't do this without God. It starts with everything he gives. I can't manufacture it on my own. But then I make every effort to respond to his promises. God has given us everything we need. We decide whether to activate it or not. And that takes effort. In fact, it doesn't just take effort. Peter says it takes every effort. It takes every effort to respond to all of God's promises, to trust him when we're tempted to try and figure out the answers for ourselves. It's easy to just rely on ourselves, but it takes every effort to say, no, I put my trust in God initially, but I'm gonna keep putting my trust in him every day of my life. It takes every effort to confess the things that we would rather keep a secret. It takes every effort to lay down our agenda and serve someone else. It takes every effort to show compassion when it's easier to criticize, to be generous when there's a little fear-filled voice in the back of our minds constantly telling us that we need to keep it all for ourselves. God has given us everything we need. We decide whether to give him every effort we have. That's how this spiritual life works. Now, this doesn't mean we are making every effort to convince God to forgive us, because he already has if we put our faith in Jesus. Doesn't mean that we're making every effort to be rescued from our old life. We already have been. That happens through God's effort, not ours. Jesus made every effort to save us through his death and resurrection, and it worked. And we have been given a new car, a new life that we did not buy, we did not earn on our own. But all of us, whatever our past, have been given this new vehicle, this new way of doing life by God's power. We couldn't have figured it out on our own, but God gave it to us as a free gift, and we have options now. Before we knew Jesus, we didn't have options. We were like rolling up the window. You know what I'm talking about? I guess this is the only way to do relationships. Unresolved conflict all the time. I guess this is the only way to do life. Just focus on myself all the time. But now that we know Jesus, we have options. And what it does mean is that it takes every effort to make the most of this new life, to learn how it works differently from our old life, how to activate and enjoy and share the features of our faith. In fact, you may be surprised to hear me say this because I talk all the time about how important these things are, but did you know that we don't have to gather like this to experience God? This is an option. It's an option. We don't have to do this to experience God. It's an option in the same way that doors on a car are an option. You don't need them to drive. But they are an important option. Anybody know what I'm talking about? And without them, you could fall out. We don't have to gather like this to experience God, but it is an important option. We don't have to connect with God's people to get from point A, birth, to point B, death, but man, does it ever make the drive better. The scenery is so much richer. We don't have to serve to be saved, but that is part of what Jesus gave us a new car for. The car of the spiritual life does not just have a driver's seat. It has places to bring other people along with us on the ride, because that's part of God's promises. We don't have to trust God every day and invite and read the Bible and pray and give to be forgiven, but that is part of how we respond to God's promises. We make every effort to grow in our faith. We activate every option. God's given us everything we need. We make every effort to use it in ways that honor him and fulfill us. Peter says it this way: supplement your faith. In other words, add to it, increase it, expand it. With what? With a generous provision of moral excellence. It's talking about our character. And moral excellence with knowledge. And knowledge with self-control. And self-control with patient endurance. And patient endurance with godliness. And godliness with brotherly affection. And brotherly affection with love for everyone. Those are options. Faith was a gift from God. It's non-negotiable. But we can expand our faith by experiencing more of what God has planned for us. We can make every effort to resist the influences of the world around us that, like a gravitational pull, are trying to pull us away from God's best for us. And we can decide instead that we're gonna lean into the influence of God on our lives. We're gonna grow in our faith, because everything God gives, plus every effort we make, equals a great life. That's the formula for a great life. And through faith in Jesus, we have the power to live a truly great life. Not a humanly perfect or necessarily even humanly impressive from the outside life, but a truly great life, a life that pleases God, influences others, and fulfills us. I want you to look at those verses again. We supplement our faith with a generous provision of moral excellence. In other words, when people at school or work are compromising their character, we, by the power of God, can live in the purity of God, and we can reflect him to the world around us. And we add to that knowledge. We can get to know God more. It's kind of like marriage. Susie and I just celebrated 27 years of marriage. I know, and I know you were applauding for her. I understand. You're like, Susie, seriously, way to go. Patient endurance. Come on, way to go, way to go. 27 years, and it's remarkable that two people who are so stunningly young could have been married 27 years. But, you know, I said I do 27 years ago. I have learned a lot more about Susie since then. She has learned a lot more about me since then. We can grow in our knowledge of God, and we add to that knowledge self-control. Some of us are saved, but we don't have self-control. We're still living like we lived before we were saved, because we haven't activated the option of the rest of our life lining up with what God says is true about us now. But we can, and we can add to self-control patient endurance. What does that mean? We can go through the same kind of suffering that other people go through, but we come out on the other side better, because by God's power, we learn to patiently endure. We can add godliness, which means we reflect the character and kindness of God in our relationships. Brotherly affection. What does that mean? It means that some of us love people because we're Christians, but we don't like people. But there is an option where we could actually start liking some people. And not just, I love you because God says I have to, but you just, No, we can actually feel affection toward the people that we do life with. And then we can add to that love for, what's the word? Everyone. You can't do that without God. Only people who have God in their lives can love everyone, but it is an option. Once we have God in our lives, we can learn to love everyone, and that is a great life. But it is also, listen to me, an optional life. You don't have to live it. It's an optional life. And there are people, some of us, who have put our faith in Jesus and then been like, I'm good. I'm just gonna drive in this car with no doors and get to the end of my life. I'm going to heaven, but nothing between here and there will look like heaven. God has more for us. And you can't live this life without him, but he won't live it for you. He provides everything we need, but we make every effort. It requires a daily decision. How am I going to live my life today? Am I just going to get by, spending the rest of my life rolling up windows? Or am I going to lean into the power of God and the people of God so that I can experience all the promises of God? And here's why it matters. Because the more you grow like this, the more productive and useful, the more influential you will be in your knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. But those who fail to develop in this way are short-sighted or blind, forgetting that they have been cleansed from their old sins. What does that mean? It means that when we fail to tap into all that God has for us, it's often because we have forgotten all God has done for us. He has forgiven us. He has given us a new life. And let me just pause and say, I know some of us are going, okay, I know that through Jesus we all have a new life, but some people get a better new life than others. No, some people activate more options than others. God did not give you an inferior new life. You didn't get a broken model. All of us can access all God has for us. And not only that, it doesn't matter what your past has looked like. It doesn't matter what the first part of your life looked like. From today forward, you can begin to access all the options. You could be sitting in the front seat, and as you lean into your influence that you have with God and that God has on you, you can find out that you can actually press a button and talk to the third row. There are options to this life of faith. And all of us forget that, which is why we need the power of God inside of us. We need to stir that up on a daily basis. And we need the people of God around us. And we need that on a daily basis to remind us of all that God has done for us and all that God has for us. Our summer semester of J Groups, as you heard, is getting ready to start in just a few weeks. And again, these are just small groups of people doing life together. And our summer semester, we do 3 semesters, spring, summer, fall. Summer's the shortest, and this is the right time. It's a great time to select the option of leading a group. And I know some of you are going, man, I don't know if I'm ready for that. If you believe in Jesus and you've been in a group at least once, I want to challenge you, encourage you to lead a group. You don't have to have everything figured out. Lead a group. If you're not sure what kind of group to lead, we'll give you a group in a box this weekend. Before you leave your location, grab a group in a box. Put it this way, we'll give you everything you need. Actually, God will give you everything you need. We'll supplement it, because that's what we're supposed to do. And we've made every effort so that you can make every effort. Why? Because listen, your life will change when you realize this is not a solo commute. And part of the purpose God has for you lies in the passenger seats he has placed in the vehicle of your life. Because you were meant to bring a few people along for the ride. And when you just create space for people in your world and in your life and invite them into it, you help them remember all that God has done for them and all that God has in store for them. And in the process, you are reminded of all that God has done for you and has for you. Because listen, everything God gives, plus every effort we make, that's what equals a great life. And here's the last part. Peter writes this. He says, so dear brothers and sisters, work hard to prove that you really are among those God has called and chosen. We're not working hard to prove that to God. We're working hard to prove that to a watching world. You really are among those God has called and chosen. Do these things, and I love this. You will never fall away. You'll never fall out of this fulfilling, meaningful life. You'll never lose sight of your purpose on this planet. We have a question that we ask staff and leaders in our church sometimes when they get tired, because we get tired, all of us do. And we have a great staff here. Our staff exists to equip you to do what God's called you to do. We have a couple of hundred of you that are in leadership roles throughout our church, and you get tired sometimes. So we have this question we ask: are you good tired or bad tired? You say, what's the difference? I thought it was just like tired. No, there's a good tired and there's a bad tired. Good tired comes from doing things that matter. Good tired comes from doing things that have purpose to them, so they may temporarily wear us out, but they're part of our purpose, and so it's a meaningful tired. We're still exhausted, we're still worn out. Physically, we still feel all the same things, but you can fix good tired with a nap or some time off. That's good tired. Bad tired, though, comes from going too long, ignoring our purpose, and acting like life is all about us, and losing sight of what matters most. In fact, you can get good tired and bad tired doing the exact same things. It's the motivation for doing them that makes the difference. And how quickly you think the reward is due you. That's what makes a difference. You get bad tired fast when you're like, I'll do this, but it better pay off quick. God is into delayed gratification. I don't know if you've noticed. But good tired, you can take a nap, you can take some time off, you can go on vacation. Bad tired, that's harder to fix. That takes remembering what God has done for us and then making every effort to respond to his promises again. That's getting back to our why in this world. So listen, you're gonna work hard in this life. You will either work hard by God's power and with God's people for something that matters, or you will work hard by your own power without God's people for something that you eventually realize doesn't matter very much at all. But we're all gonna work hard in this life. One of those choices leads to a good tired, where we live a life that matters. I'm not talking about exhausting ourselves with some kind of martyr complex. I just mean we've found something to do that benefits others, and we do it with all our heart. And the other, the bad tired, that leads to a place where we feel empty and our purpose isn't clear. And because God wants you to experience the good tired in this life, he has given you everything you need. Every option is available to you. And everything God gives, plus every effort you make, is what equals a great life. And not just for you, but also for the passengers, your family and friends and neighbors and people you work with and are related to, are watching you live this life. Whatever is next in your spiritual journey, whatever next step you need to take, you can't take it without God, and he won't take it for you. He's given you everything you need. Now make every effort to respond to his promises. And if that hits home for you today, if you would say, I need that reminder, would you lift your hand all over the room, all of our locations, lift that hand high. And online, you can participate in this right where you are. And then would you open your heart up to God with me? Come on, let me pray this over us. In fact, why don't we turn this into our prayer today? Just if this hits home for you, you're a follower of Jesus, but you need this reminder today. Just Tell God, thank you for giving me everything I need, God. I'm gonna give you every effort I have. Remind me of what you've done for me. As you let God speak to you, let me remind you that you do not have to earn God's love. You're not working hard to prove to him that you deserve to be forgiven. You are forgiven through what Jesus did. You are loved. We don't give God our every effort to be loved. We give God our every effort because we are loved. God, remind me today that it takes every effort to respond to your promises. Help me lean in, determined to continue this spiritual journey. I believe God's speaking to somebody maybe right now that you've become complacent and no judgment, but you've pulled the car almost over to the side of the road. Maybe you've even been in an accident in your mind. You feel like you can't recover from. God is saying, no, I've given you everything you need. Get back behind the wheel. It's by my power. I'm gonna give you my grace. And while you let God speak to you for a moment more, if you're in the room at one of our locations or watching online right now, making the decision to put all your faith, your trust, and confidence in Jesus. I mentioned this earlier, it does not just add a few features to the life you're already living. When God draws you to him and you respond by his power to say yes to following Jesus, you receive a new life. Your whole life is transformed. And it begins from the inside, works its way out over time. And to experience that means throwing all your confidence in Jesus alone. He does not want to be an option. He has so many things in your life that are optional, but he is not an option. And when you decide that Jesus alone is going to be leader and Lord of your life, and you believe in your heart that he died to forgive your sins and he rose again, and you declare with your mouth that he is your King, your Lord, you become a child of God and your life changes. And if you want to take that step today, I'm going to lead us in prayer again. This is your moment. So I want everyone to join me. Just block out everything else, focus on God. And if that's you today, you would say, I want to put my faith in Jesus. Whisper out a prayer faith, something like this. Jesus, today I believe in you, and I'm giving you my life. I know that I can't do anything to earn your love. So by faith, I simply receive your gift of salvation. I believe right now you are rescuing my soul, and that from this moment forward, I belong to you. I receive your new life today. And if that's you, while everyone around you stays focused on God, if you would say, I want to be counted in that, I want to be included in that, I'm putting my faith in Jesus today, would you lift your hands, hold it up boldly? If you would say, yeah, I'm putting my faith in Jesus today. Yes, trusting him with my life. In every room, online, you can type the word faith in the comments right now. Let us know you're taking that step. And then make sure before you leave today, if you're gathering with us in person, make sure you fill in one of those Connect cards you heard about. If you're online, you can see the link to that right now. We love to just send you some information that'll help you continue what God started in your life today. Help you take the next step. But for right now, Journey, would you help me? Let's give Jesus all the praise. Can we do that together?